Danielle Radoichin, and welcome back to In Talks With for more adventures in visual culture. This week, we're in Brussels during Art Week with the American painter Pam Glick at Marouane Mercier Gallery, where she's debuting her vibrant new exhibition, Romantic Comedy. Known for her instinctive use of colour and emotionally resonant abstraction, Glick reflects on a career that has moved through multiple chapters, from early acclaim in New York's 1980s art scene to a quieter period of teaching and raising kids in Vermont, and now a return to exhibiting with renewed perspective and creative energy. We speak about painting through illness, the importance of optimism, and how structure and spontaneity coexist in her process. A bit about Pam. Born in Albany, Georgia in 1956, she studied painting at the Rhode Island School of Design and later earned her MFA from the University of Buffalo. Her work was widely shown throughout the 1980s and 90s, with solo exhibitions in New York and Los Angeles, and her paintings have also featured in group exhibitions at Pat Hearn Gallery, the Drawing Center, and the Buffalo AKG Art Museum. More recently, she's held solo exhibitions at White Column and the Journal Gallery in New York. This exhibition here is her first time showing in Brussels. This is a wide-ranging and deeply personal conversation on resilience, rebellion, and the surprising solace of Pretty Woman, plus her reverse Michelangelo process of painting and why her new work embraces joyous escapism. Hi, Pam.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's such a pleasure to meet you. We're here in Brussels during Art Week, I think at the Marouane Mercier Gallery, where you have an exhibition, Romantic Comedy. And I know it opened to the public yesterday evening. How was it? How's it all going?
It seems to be going really well. I don't have the mind of an art dealer in terms of all of that, but I've had some great conversations and met a lot of people that are really interested in the work. And of course, most of my day on a regular basis is in the studio by myself. So I have to really...
In New York?
Yeah. My studio's in Long Island City. So it's a very solitary life, even though I live in the middle of Manhattan. I'm in my studio. So you have to really switch gears when you have a show, especially in a new city and all new people and everything. It's really thrilling, but also,
that change from being introverted to...
I have to pay attention all the time now.
And suddenly you have to switch on your social mode.
Yeah.
So when did you get here from New York?
Today's Saturday, I think. Or we left New York on Saturday.
And were you
So we kind of got here on Sunday.
Okay. And did you help with the hanging and
No, it was
installations?
all done when I got here.
Yeah.
And I was really thrilled with what it looked like. I didn't know what the gallery looked like. It's kind of a mini Whitney museum. It's brutalist, and I love the shapes of the rooms. It's almost like each painting or two paintings have their own room. Yeah. So they have plenty of breathing space, and I just was thrilled. It was really like a thrilling ride threading through the gallery. Like, oh my God, look at this room, and the angles of the floor and the paintings, and the architecture is so serious and severe that it really plays off well, and it's monochromatic. Then the paintings are
very colourful.
Not that,
Yeah, no, it looks absolutely fantastic, and
thank you.
The first time I've seen your work in real life, because I was looking at a lot of them online and in pieces of paper, so it's a real pleasure to see.
Thank you.
So how long this is the first time you've exhibited in Brussels?
It is. Yeah. And it's been, I think we've been planning it maybe a year or a little bit less. We met about a year ago, and yeah, I knew very little about the art, the galleries here, and what an intense art population it is, and appreciation, and galleries and museums. And
so what's the story from you? So you said they reached out to you. Tell me the story of how it went from that conversation to this.
I had not recently, but fairly recently, had signed on with Stephen Friedman Gallery in London. And how did they reach out? Maybe on Instagram or something?
That's how it happens these days, right?
Yeah. And so you never know if it's like a stalker or a serious collector or a gallery. I've had all of those happen. But so we met in London when I think they were also invited to the dinner that Stephen gave that fall, because everyone is friends, the way the art world is. And Serge and Laurent took me out to such an amazing lunch. Anyway, they just have this attention to detail, and they're really gracious and kind and tasteful. I really felt comfortable hanging out with them. We went to some auction previews after lunch together, the three of us, and looked at paintings and talked about them. And like all artists, I'm super opinionated, and I think they were like, "Oh, what's she like?" And so we had fun that afternoon.
How does it work? Do they commission? Is this all work that was made for this, specifically for this show, or was it work that you'd already been working on?
I'd kind of been. Oh well, back then we kind of decided to work together, but I didn't have a date or anything like that. But the way I work, I have never had the kind of career where I had 3 or 4 shows, so I'm constantly painting for a specific show, but I'm always painting. So I think they landed at, a certain time, and I was doing this body of work, and it just all worked out really well. Actually, I was very surprised. Laurent came to New York in December, came to the studio, and we had a delightful studio visit. I don't think he had ever been to my studio. They just had seen work at Frieze. Oh, that's where he saw my work the first time, was at Frieze. They both saw my solo show in New York, and apparently they were like, whoa, we have to find that person. And but they came in December, and he picked out the whole show. I had no idea that was going to happen. I thought they were just coming to check in and see what was going on in the studio. But I was in a very prolific stage right then, and also I am in general. I do a lot of work and but drag it out over a long period of time. So it just was great timing. He came to the studio. I had a bunch of stuff ready, and so then he went boom, 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 boom. I'm like, what? And then the shipper was there in 3 days. I was like, I barely got to live with the work for very long. And
how long does it take to create one of these?
Each one is different. The monochromatic paintings are really different to make, that all blue one. Mm-hmm. So when there's a section that I don't like, I kind of get rid of it and kind of start over from scratch in that one area. Once I started working with this intense color, it's so much harder. I'll have a day where I'll put 2 colors down, and the entire day I'm like, are you kidding me? That's all I did today was orange and yellow, ugh. But so they're kind of slow. Each one is a little bit different because, okay, if I start with, let's say, yellow. Like, okay, I'm just going to do a monochrome, like disperse yellow color everywhere.
I should say which one we're looking at. Love Actually.
Yeah, it's Love Actually.
So yes, this has very bright.
48 inches square.
So it's one of the sort of more medium. It's large, but not the largest, and it's very, very bright.
Yeah, it's very bright. And so I work on the floor, and so when I put it up, it either is just like, okay, everything is behaving on the, or if there's a part that's like not working, I'll maybe look at it for a day and see if I know what to do, and I often will just block it back out in white.
Right.
And then, but sometimes it just takes like weeks. They won't.
And do you work on consecutively on concurrently?
Yes,
yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Because sometimes one combination will inform another painting.
Yeah.
None of them are the same, obviously, but like, oh, those two colors together would work over here.
And when you work they're on the floor, are you sort of towering over it in that kind of Jackson Pollocky way, or are you on your knees sort of really?
Okay, both of those things. And they kind of lucky, they have these very low benches here, so I can kind of show, like the 6-foot ones are the ones I need the bench for. So I have this thing that my son Eli made. It's like a skateboard, but it's 8 feet long and kind of about this wide.
As wide as this bench, which is like 1.5 feet.
Yeah. And I put the painting on the floor and I roll this over it.
Oh, wow.
So I'm kind of reverse Michelangelo. Well, the painting is obviously face up on the floor.
Yeah.
And I roll this over it. So I'm kneeling on this skateboard thing. And, kind of like, I'm like this. And so I'm very, very close to it.
Yeah.
And I can't see exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that's why when I start a painting, when it's a raw canvas, I'll put a pencil grid on. Not so much of where lines are going to go, but straightness, horizontal and vertical.
So that's how you start, is with the pencil?
Yeah, that's how I start. And I use a level and really do a grid.
Okay, so it's proper...
Well, otherwise, when I'm painting on the floor, it goes very wonky, and it becomes diagonal, and I don't want it to be diagonal. And I've done that plenty of times, and I have to paint it out and start over.
So the measuring is quite a kind of geometric, kind of scientific process, because your paintings look quite organic to me. They're not like a Mondrian-esque straight line, but there is the grid, but it looks quite... there's a lot of movement.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want it to look like a Mondrian or exact. And also I make so many changes from the original grid. But really the grid itself is like guidelines. Yeah. More of like when you're on a hike in a forest and like, okay, there's
your landmarks,
a mark.
Yeah. Your knees must be very tough.
Yeah, I guess they are like that. Sometimes one of them hurts. I don't know which one at the moment, but...
You reverse Michelangelo.
Yeah, that's
good. It's a good way of putting it.
I've never said that one before.
All right. Okay, great.
But when I do read about it, it's like, oh yeah, because... and I've thought about him, like, he was so close to these things and couldn't really get away from them. Yeah. So pretty extraordinary what he was...
Also, you're breathing in stuff, presumably.
Yeah, I'm breathing in stuff, but it's acrylic paint. I don't use turpentine. I don't need any of that. Although some of the paint is interior house paint, but it's a water soluble. And
well, the effect is amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's great. Was there these bright colours? And is this a recent development? I mean, I know you've worked with colour a lot,
Yeah.
But you just mentioned how, you just said it yourself, the bright colours. And I was looking at the thing earlier and I was thinking, gosh, it's very like, I was thinking of David Hockney and almost like Miami. So, you know, those kind of very bright colours.
I think I just have been particularly happy and relieved, and you know, it just kind of reflects also, I don't know, being lucky to be doing this. And
is it because...
And I do love color. Like, it seems like color is almost like a cheap way of getting emotional charge, because it's way harder to use this much color. Like those monochromatic paintings, I could just do those all day. And sometimes I have to redraw parts of it, but this is like a way harder challenge. And I don't have any rules about any of it, like size.
So it's instinct.
Yeah, it's very instinctual. And I was like a real colorist, like way back in art school. My teachers would say that. I didn't know what that meant, but I just have an instinctual way of looking at color. And try to, you know, kind of mix it up intentionally, but balance and the structure and all the traditional art academic concerns.
Can you imagine being colorblind? I was just reading. I was just reading a book about Eve Babbitt's. You know that LA.
Right. I love that book. That was really fun.
The one about Didion and Babbitt's.
Yeah.
You read it?
Yeah.
And I was reading about her relationship with Paul Richet, Ed's brother, and he was colorblind. Apparently.
Yeah.
And I just find that astounding, just as a concept.
I've had people in my studio, like a friend of a friend would come with them or something, like, it's blue or something. I'm like, what?
I know, it's like that when you're kids, when you're your version of red is different to someone else.
Yeah.
But you said that it reflects, you know, it's emotional and it reflects your feelings. And is that because I know that you are a survivor? You had cancer, or you had lymphoma, which was detected early, and I hope you don't mind me. I know you've spoken about it in the past, but I was wondering, is that why? When you say you're feeling lucky and happy, and
that's a huge part of it. But also, I'm kind of annoyingly positive, and
in general, always.
In general,
okay.
And so it's kind of an extra shot of that. Like, I get to do this for however long, you know, everybody's, I guess, thinks about.
Why'd you say annoyingly positive?
Because I just have never been really dark and gloomy and more art world cliche of depressive or... Yeah, we, in our breakfast, kind of part of our kitchen growing up, there was this English needlepoint thing of Queen Victoria, and it said, "There will be no depression in this house." It was this quote, and I think like in high school I found out about therapy and said to my parents, like, I think I would like to go to therapy. Like, why would you ever want to do that? You're fine. You're smart enough. You can figure it out. Whatever.
Yeah.
That was.
That is quite a Victorian mindset, isn't it? That like.
Yeah.
Stiff up and get on with it. But I think it is. I mean, people say that optimism is you have to work at it, or you have to make an effort to be positive.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that?
I do sometimes. I mean, because obviously life can be challenging, like surviving cancer. But I cannot tell you how a positive attitude, how much that helped me. And the caregivers around me, my kind of mantra then was that chemo was my best friend, and I loved chemo. I couldn't wait to go and get my chemo. And, there's side effects that make you feel lousy and everything, but the nurses would say, I would tell them that. They're like, "Oh, how are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm here to, hang out with my best friend." They're like, "Oh, I wish every patient would feel that way." But I really did feel that way. I didn't make myself. because, I mean, that's what's saving your life. So why wouldn't that be your best friend?
Yeah. But also being able to come with that positive attitude to it and seeing it in that way that's a gift to have that.
It is. I mean, I'm not genius for doing it. It just kind of occurred to me that that was the logical relationship to it.
Because you were working as well. I heard on one of your podcasts that you've been on that I listened to, you were talking about how the Stephen Friedman show was happening. I think, was it before, at the same time you were having it?
It was at the same time. And I was just starting to paint the paintings for it. And I got the diagnosis. I was like, God damn it. Like, how am I going to paint that show? Like, that was my first thought. And I thought, I don't have to tell them. But his director, Alyssa Friedman, she's not related to Stephen, but she is the director of New York, and she is incredible. And I thought, if there's anybody I feel comfortable telling about this. And so I called her, and she said, well, how do you feel about doing the show? And I said, I absolutely am. I really want to do it. I think it'll help me get through this. You know, when you get chemo, there's a week after where you're tired and you just I couldn't have painted in that week, but then there's 2 more weeks where you feel fine. And so that's when I worked. And my younger son, both my kids were still in Buffalo at the time. This all happened in Buffalo. He came to the studio with me almost every day because I was too weak to pick up these big paintings, but I felt normal in terms of being able to work and think clearly and everything like that. So Eli and Sylvester, our dachshund, we would all go to the studio together, and it was.
You have 2 sons?
I have 2 sons. The other Alva's here with me in London now.
Lovely.
Yeah. So Eli is a stand-up comedian. And he does
in New York.
In New York, and Alva is an art lawyer in New York. So we all live in New York now. So much happened. Well, my mom passed away about a year before I had this diagnosis, and I was getting ready to sell her house and move to New York. But I, was always aiming to move back to New York. Yeah. And COVID happened, and actually my brother got sick, then my mother got sick. Then when I got sick, I'm like, I'm never going to get back to New York. This is ridiculous. But it all worked out.
Was that always an aim for you to, because you moved to New York initially? It was always in the 80s. You were there
I moved in 1980 after art school.
Right. Which I want to hear about. I want to hear about what it was like in New York at that time.
It was amazing. Yeah, it was really different. In that,
so let's just go back. So you So you grew up in Albany.
I grew up in Buffalo, New York. I was born in Georgia. My dad was in the Air Force.
Okay. Did you move around a lot?
And we lived in Newmarket for 2 years in England.
Oh right.
Yeah. And
how old were you then?
0 to 2.
Oh right.
I think we moved when I was 6 weeks.
Okay.
And we lived in this little cottage on Lady North's property. Who apparently I met her years later. I was a teenager. My parents went back to see her.
Lady North.
Yeah, that was her name. Kind of like a book, a P.G. Woodhouse character. Like, I couldn't believe that. It's real. But it was close to the heath where they exercise the horses, and I love horses. I think I got injected with that early on.
So you said you were an athletic, you gifted athlete. Was it horse riding that you were particularly into?
No. I mean, my parents hardly let me ride horses when I was that young. My mother thought it was addictive and antisocial and expensive. Yeah. And I was really athletic, so sports and art kind of saved me from being thrown out of school. Well, I think the sports saved me.
Why were you not academic? Or the kids rebellious?
Rebellious. And the school cared about the sports You know, if you're scoring goals and all of that.
Yeah. So that kept you in.
They like their school winning games. And so that saved my...
What sort of upbringing, what were your parents like? Was it like religious? Was it...
No, they were so hands-off, like very typical 60s and 70s.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And my dad was a lawyer and had an office in London. And so, especially in the high school years, when they would be in London and my brother and I would be in Buffalo, we gave these massive parties. And I would meet people later, like years later, like, oh, you're Pam Glick. I went to the most amazing party at your house. And I'd never seen them before. I'm like,
wow.
Oh, great.
Wow.
So those were also the days that you could call the store and say, oh, could you deliver 2 cases of beer to the Glicks? And they would just leave it in the back hall and charge it to my mother's account. And
those days, the heady days. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
It was the 70s, and we went to some, rock concerts and was smoking pot a lot on the way to school. So
sport and art saved you, and you went on to study art, or at I can't. You went to the
I went to Rhode Island
School of Design, which people call RISD.
Yeah, when I told my dad I wanted to go to art school, he's like, "What's art school?"
Yeah,
like he had no idea.
It's funny. So you weren't. It wasn't like they were into art, or
no, not at all. They were like very popular and entertained a lot, and kind of had this magic, relaxed thing about the whole family. And but no, they never really knew what we were up to, or at least what I was up to. I can't speak for my brother,
But do you think that helped you in a way, just become...
Oh yeah, I was so independent from an early age.
Are you grateful for that?
I am. Yeah. I mean, I was kind of obsessed with Woody Guthrie and hobos, and I would hitchhike for fun, and thought that was like a great adventure. Oh, I mean, it could be called entitled, but it also was just, they let me be, they never tried to form me into being a certain thing. And
did that help build your confidence? I know you said that you had an inherent confidence that you think helped you as well.
Yeah, I think that sports is a confidence builder, and the art teacher in high school who said, like, okay, this room is yours, to the 4 of us in the school that loved making things there. So we just would go there all the time, even skip class sometimes, and she was always just, what do you need, and if we needed instruction or something. But
I like the way you talked. I've heard you talk about your years at college and sort of saying how you were being told how good you were, but you were surprised and almost didn't understand what they saw in you.
I thought it was hilarious. They're like, oh, you're such a colorist. Like, what is that?
They probably thought you were just so cool.
No, I don't know. I ran into the PA from my freshman and sophomore year, the professor's assistant. I met her in New York. I never...
many years later?
Last year. And she was telling me about the staff meetings that they would have. And she said, when it would come to you, they would be, don't talk to her. Don't say anything to her. Don't give her any, just leave her alone. She's fine. So I think they thought I was some kind of outsider artist or something. And they didn't want it.
It's amazing they recognize that. Actually, it's similar to what your parents were like.
Yeah.
To just let you get on with it.
Yeah, they just let me get on with it. So I was creating these huge paintings. I had no idea what I was doing, but I look at them now. I have a few of them still. When we moved out of Buffalo, I gave them to some friends, and they're just really crazy. So, I think I had a kind of an ideal, and I loved art school. I could not believe you could do that all day. Other kids were like that, and I made great friends there, and they let me paint at home if I wanted to. I didn't have to go to the big group studio, and yeah, it was so cool.
So let's talk about New York. So you moved, you lived there. I think it was like 1980 till into the 90s. You were there for a chunk of time.
Yeah, till 1995.
Whereabouts were you living?
I was living on East 7th Street
in
the East Village next to the Ukrainian church. And my studio was on East 9th Street between B and C, I think. It was further over.
It must have been quite something at that time.
It was, like you could buy drugs on every corner, and it was pretty dirty. But when I went to pay the rent was something like $120. I would take cash to the guy's office who was in Greenwich Village and say hi to him. He would be in a room and give him cash. And occasionally I had a waitress job around the corner, this place called Paul's Lounge. There's so many characters in that place too. But my dad occasionally would send me a check if I was a little behind, and we would go to Jana Schimmel's, which is a Knish store, and that's where I would cash my check. I didn't even have a bank account. I just worked on cash, and eventually I got a bank account, but yeah, it was so much smaller. Like, the artwork was teeny. And
were you aware of the art scene? Was there a scene? I mean, people talk about a scene like retrospectively, but there was obviously so much happening in New York at that time, not just in art, but in music, with the whole hip-hop thing happening, and disco, tail end of disco, and all that. I mean, but were you aware that there was...
Yeah, but it just seemed like you're in it, so that's just what's happening. Like, it didn't seem like a phenomena or anything. But I loved rap as soon as I heard it. I could not believe... It was just a completely different sound. I always had liked jazz because my father liked it. So it seemed like something like that was being invented. Like, this is like jazz getting invented. And then it actually was, but I remember thinking that and seeing kids break dance on the subway and in nightclubs and stuff like that. The nightclubs would have like 2 turntables, and people would be playing music and scratching and all.
Do you know the photographer Janet Beckman? I
know the name.
I just mentioned that because I interviewed her for this podcast a few years ago. But she's British, but she spent a lot of time. She lives in New York, and she spent a lot of time documenting the hip hop scene.
Interesting.
In the 80s. It just really brings it to life, you know.
But like all the characters, like I would eat breakfast at this B&H dairy on 2nd Avenue, and Quentin Crisp was this. Have you heard of? Do you know who that is?
Yeah, of course. He was in the Hotel Chelsea, wasn't he? Did he live in the?
Yeah. No, he lived in this building across from the men's shelter on 3rd Street.
Okay.
And he would often have breakfast at the same time. We were both early risers, and so.
Did you talk to him?
Yeah, we would always chat it up during breakfast, and years later I was realizing, like, oh my God, he's kind of iconic, and it just seemed Rocket's Red Glare. There was just like some really amazing characters that I got to know.
And were you selling work at that time?
I think yes. In the first 5 years seemed.
You could support yourself through making art. Well, you said you had a waitress job.
Yeah, I had a waitress job, but you made slides back then of your work and would physically take them to galleries and drop them off, and then...
What, slides for a projector?
Slides for a projector.
Right, yeah.
Like, you would take pictures and then get them developed at the store, and like within a few months, the art dealer Holly Solomon, I had taken my slides to her gallery, and she called me, came to my studio. That it was a triangular walls painted black, and the guy who lived in the front would not let me paint it white or anything. So it was just the worst looking place. And she came to that studio. She bought a couple of paintings and said, "Oh, you need to go see my son Tom Solomon is running this nonprofit gallery called White Columns." And so that's actually where I had my first show, was the original iteration of White Columns. So my career has taken like a really nice full circle. But yeah, she was really supportive. Another dealer, Brooke Alexander, bought some paintings early
sort
on.
of boom time, was it, for art in the 80s? Was it?
I guess so.
Yeah.
I'm having never been in New York or known what artists had gone through in the 70s, which I think was very, very minimal. And then the little gallery started popping up in the East Village, and I showed with Jamie Wolfe there quite a lot, and he sold my work to Eli Broad. Like, he bought a ton of paintings. I had a studio in the basement of Daniel Newberg's gallery, and I had to walk through Richard Prince's studio to get to my studio.
Wow.
And
did you meet him?
He worked at night. I think we met a couple of times, but we never hung out or anything. I was always very early riser, and he, I think, came in much later. But he was doing this series of New Yorker cartoons, and I remember Eli Broad walking through, because I'd have to bring everybody, and he was like, "Oh, is this like an illustrator that is working in here?" And I was trying to explain politely what Richard Prince was doing. And
what made you develop? Like, I'm looking at this now, and you've been doing this grid thing for a while. And like, at what point did you find this
kind of solid
signature? For want of a better word, signature kind of thing. Were you aware? Were you looking at the abstract expressionist things going on, and were you thinking of? I know you've said in the past you were influenced by Clifford still, and was that like, or were you just thinking? Was it kind of a more subconscious absorption of all those things, and then you just developed it kind of freely?
I think I've always had like an instinctual way of working, but kind of inventing rules for myself is always, probably everyone does that, but that is something that I've always done. And I mildly would count things a lot, like when I was stuck in traffic, I'm not saying I'm diagnosed with anything, but like, kind of like it had to always be a perfect round number. And I don't know, there was something about order that was always really important to me. And in terms of the drawing parts of this, like when I would be in trouble in school and be in detention or something, I would always have these books that the principal's secretary would give me, and I would kind of draw, and she'd say, "Oh, practice your penmanship." And I think I was pretending to do that and maybe doing it a little, but I really have memories of like doing this kind of work. I wouldn't have called it work back then. It's really innate. Like, that's the given part. You know, the harder thing is like, oh, what's the structure of the painting, and then color, and, you know, what is it all about? But there's this very personal language in it, which is completely logical to me. And the different nuances within it seem like an endless possibility of ways to do it. And
it's interesting, that contrast as well between you saying, you know, you need the order, and I know, like you've said in the past, that you like a deadline as well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a really nice contrast to what you were also saying about your kind of rebellious streak and your free-spiritedness.
Yeah. Well, I'm making the deadline and I'm making the order.
Self-imposed.
Yeah.
And then, so you spent time in New York. and you were successul, and then you left New York.
Yeah.
And I know you've talked about this a lot, but we should probably, just for the sake of the narrative, go through it. Yeah.
Well, I had my first child in New York, and I'm kind of not a good multitasker.
Yes.
And I found that out very quickly.
I loved how I heard you talked about this, and I'm sorry to make you go over it.
No,
because I heard you talk about this.
It's like talking about my kids. So.
Well, no, but one thing that I really liked was that you said how you said you don't like to multitask, but that having children, you didn't see us preventing you from making art. It was a creative act in itself, raising the children.
So much so.
You moved with them to Vermont?
Yeah. I was married to another artist, a designer, sculptor, welder dude. Mm-hmm. And we had our first child in New York, and I thought we would just go back and forth. He ended up being able to do that, but I don't think I think maybe I did it once, but we had 2 dogs, a baby, and then I had the second one about a year and a half later. I had him in New York. Alva was born at Beth Israel, which I think just closed. That hospital I think it might have just closed down. But anyway, Eli was born in Vermont, and we lived on a small hobby farm. And so when I say I didn't work, I meant mostly that, I just stopped having an art career. I was making things on paper, but mostly it was so creative, as we were talking about, making puppets or building, forts and things outside. And I also was teaching in 2 high schools in the area. I was teaching at Putney School, which is super nice, private boarding school, and the kids tend to be more artistic. And then I was teaching at at-risk boys' school. I started an art program there, completely opposite population. And I ended up, when my kids were a little older, I started an art program at their ski racing academy. They were both tremendous skiers, and Alba still loves to ski. But so then teaching athletes, they are the best students. I don't know if I ever said that, but they're so used to being coached and they aren't personally insulted if you criticize their work, which the kids at Putney were like, oh yeah, we have a Cezanne at home. They were much harder to be an art teacher of, even though they were very creative. The athletes were they would absorb instruction or criticism, nothing personal at all, and they were really good. They were incredible artists. Wow. It was you could just.
That's so interesting.
It was real. I've never seen a study on that or anything, but one of the kids, and I know he did not end up being an artist, but he could have gone and been, but he had no idea. It was sort of the way I was in art school. He was very naive, and the at-risk boys were a lot of kids from Brattleboro and very rough family life, and they just had never even had art supplies. So that was a completely different kind of teaching area, and they were like, "Oh, you're the crazy one," and they were. I still remember some of them individually. They really kind of steal your heart away.
You enjoyed the teaching?
Yeah, I love teaching. Mm-hmm. I taught at the University of Buffalo when I moved back there to. Eli had to finish school, and my mom got sick, and all kinds of things happened. Mm. So that ended up being 10 years in Buffalo. Yeah. And that brings us to...
Back to you. Yeah. So I like what you said about... I have a couple of quotes that I've pulled out that you said. So I was really interested in... I loved it. You said... somebody was talking to you about abstraction, and you said that abstraction figuration is all the same thing.
a good painting is a good painting. A really good figurative painting is good for abstract reasons. Abstract painting can have emotional content, which I really liked. Because I like this idea of, I found it interesting, because I love your idea of your paintings can be seen as abstract, but you bring so much emotion, like what you were saying, through the colour, through the movement. But also I was interested in your word paintings. I read you talking about those, and you talked about how you started with a phrase, and then you started writing it again and again and again until it sort of became something else, and you worked it into abstraction.
Exactly.
So I don't know if you wanted to expand on any of that, but you also talking about your need for grids and counting things. This made me kind of think about this, and it sounded kind of like there was a connection there as well.
Yeah, I do think there's a connection, although this is a different language than writing English letters.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the most direct way for me to get into a painting when I was doing those word things. And I've often wondered, like, oh, I wonder if I'll do that again. But it's not like you can plan these things out. It kind of has to organically happen in the studio. But I do think it's important, like I just don't censor myself at all. If you feel like doing something, and then there's, I had just gotten a divorce, I moved to Buffalo, like just so much change had happened. And I saw this phrase, "I am safe," someplace. I don't even remember where I saw it, but I wrote it out, and it felt so, I had never been in danger or anything like that. It wasn't that type of divorce. We amicably split up. But anyway, that phrase was, I think I realized I got my own studio again, and I got a regular studio life. Vermont was just so much on my plate there. And
studio back in New York.
So then from Vermont, I moved to Buffalo with my younger son. He stopped ski racing and had to finish high school, so we moved in with my mom. And I got like a really beautiful, proper studio there, because then I had time again to do that. And it was just felt very cathartic to write it out, and also just seeing lines on the canvas, like stark. I don't know, it just intuitively felt like the right thing. And as I was saying, I don't think as an artist one should like, oh, is this like a good career move to do this? Like, I think if you're dying to do something, like that's the gift right there. Like, you should do that.
Are the words important? I know, like, for example, the naming of the pieces in this exhibition are quite interesting. Like, Marry Me, Born Yesterday, Pretty Woman, But I'm a Cheerleader. Are they all films?
They're all films. Yeah. They're all romantic comedies.
Clueless. Okay. Oh, right. I've only just made that connection because the exhibition's called a romantic comedy.
And
they're all romantic comedies.
Yeah.
With the date.
I don't think of titles until after a body of work is finished. But because of how messed up our country is right now, and just everything in the world with, I don't want to get into it because I'm not professionally able to speak about all those issues, but it's so anxiety producing for everyone.
Is it particularly fraught in the art world, would you say?
Yeah, I think so.
Is it affecting the US?
Everyone is just miserable. I'm less miserable because I have my weird bubble that I've created and back in, I don't know, the womb somewhere. But no, it is extremely upsetting, and thinking, that my children, what kind of country and world are they inheriting? So when you're younger and always going to Buñuel films or, Godard or whatever, and now I kind of understand why romantic comedies are made and why people need to go to movies like that literally escape, have an ending that is beautiful and fun and.
So this is your escape that you're providing for people. These works.
Yeah, and I think that, I didn't make the paintings at all with like, oh, I'm going to make a happy painting. I really was happy when I was making these. And I think that part of that comes through the work, but the titles are absolutely from romantic Hollywood films.
Have you seen all the films?
No, not remotely. But I've seen some of them, and like a film like Pretty Woman is like undeniably addictive. Like if I see a part of that movie on TV, I'll just keep watching it.
Can't stop.
It's so good, and that one in particular, like incredible actors, and
I agree. I always think about that film and think, as a concept, it's so problematic, but who cares? It's just such a brilliant
everything about it is like,
Julia Roberts is such
and that's what art is like.
Yes,
it's you set up the problem and then you solve the problem, and that's what a film does. That's what a painting does. However, everyone does it differently. That's why it's so endlessly fascinating. And like, I'm dying to go see the Bruegel paintings, which I've loved since high school. I haven't seen them yet, but like, oh my God, that guy set himself up for like absolutely, an endless vision of the world. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Positivity and addressing a problem. That's a nice place to end, I think.
Okay.
On literally a positive note. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
You've been listening to In Talks with me, Danielle Radoichin. The sound and theme music is by Woogie Productions, and the artwork is by Patrick Waugh. If you enjoyed this episode, please pass it on to someone who you think might also like it. Please subscribe and leave a review. To pitch for guest ideas, you can DM me via my socials at Danielle Radoichin. Thanks for listening.